Welcome to all you fire drill firefighters, and to those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Fire Drill Fridays family, where we're building community and learning about the climate and taking action to address the climate crisis, that is. You know, each of you can help our movement grow by using and sharing today's show so your friends and colleagues can join the movement. So if you'll take a moment now and hit the share button, the more people who understand the gravity of this crisis and are willing to act, the more chance we have to succeed in minimizing it. It was great to see so many of you at the movie night a couple of weeks ago when we screened Kiss the Ground. If you missed it, you can still watch my Q&A with Rosario Dawson and Finian Makepeace at firedrillfridays.com/movie night. And you can see the movie. I believe it's on Amazon, but it's definitely streaming and worth watching. By the way, this month's movie night will be August 26th. It's going to celebrate Greenpeace's 50th anniversary. I'm not going to tell you yet what the movie is, but it'll be interesting. I'm also excited to share that my book, this is about the founding of Fire Drill Fridays, What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action, is going to be out in paperback next month. September 7th, in fact, is the release date. I heard from so many of you that you enjoyed reading the book and how much you learned from it and felt empowered by it. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me. But in case you haven't read it or have friends and family who haven't read it, please consider grabbing a copy or two. The soft cover makes a perfect book for traveling. It's not very heavy. And the world is slowly beginning to open up again. Maybe you're going to the beach. It's a good beach book. Wear sunscreen. So you can go to www.janefonda.com/whatcanido to pre-order your copy right now. And by the way, the proceeds go to Greenpeace, so I'd be extra grateful if you consider buying one. I wrote it while I was in DC in 2019, and I still consider it a guide for how to tackle the climate crisis without letting feelings of despair take over, which I know can be hard these days. I hope you find it as helpful as I have. The book, I mean. Now let's do some good news. We need a little good news. I think I still know how to play my xylophone. Whatcom County in Washington State has become the first such jurisdiction in the United States to ban new fossil fuel infrastructure. Whatcom County's council unanimously passed a measure that bans the construction of new refineries, coal-fired power plants, and other fossil fuel-related infrastructure. And the ordinance also places new restrictions on existing fossil fuel facilities. This is a huge win for the local communities. Congratulations. And Colorado tackles plastic pollution with a groundbreaking new law. Colorado Governor Jared Polis signed the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act into law earlier this month, banning single-use plastic bags and foam in Colorado, and removing restrictions on local municipalities. This change allows local leaders to enact stricter policies to reduce plastic waste. As you may have seen, because I posted it on my social media a few weeks ago, I recently took California's first partner, Jennifer Siebil Newsom, on a tour in Los Angeles County, where oil wells and drilling exist directly next to homes and schools and hospitals and other sensitive sites. We called it the Toxic Tour. And I filmed this that I'm going to show you right now on that tour. Here is the Boys and Girls Club in Wilmington, the basketball court. We pass a very thin wall and we see an oil well, a drilling site right next door. So you can see there how poisonously close the oil drills are to sensitive places. You know, it may come as a surprise to some, but California is a major oil producing state, and it remains one of the only ones that does not limit how close fossil fuel extraction can be to homes and schools. More than 2 million California residents currently live within a half mile or 2,500 feet of oil drilling. And the overwhelming majority of these communities are Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and working class. Study after study have shown that significant health impacts come with proximity to fossil fuel extraction sites, which emit harmful pollutants known carcinogens, for example. That means they cause cancer, and endocrine disruptors. They can cause birth defects. And in fact, the health impacts include asthma, preterm births, respiratory disease, cancer, and even dying from COVID-19, because these pollutants affect your lungs and make you more vulnerable to this virus. So we're demanding a 2,500-foot setback in California. That's the distance that scientists say is safe. It would provide dramatic improvements to the quality of life for millions of people. You know, in a recent poll done in 2021, well, this year, 79% of Californians supported a 2,500-foot public health and safety zone around oil operations. For nearly a decade, these communities have been fighting for their lives while they suffer from toxic pollution delivered by the hands of fossil fuel executives. For years, California regulators have been working on public health protections with little more than official delays and silence to show for it. We say enough is enough. Over the past year, Governor Newsom, Gavin Newsom, has taken a series of encouraging steps on climate and public health. Now he has the chance to provide long-awaited and real protections that would improve the lives of millions of people. Every day that Newsom remains in office is an opportunity for him, you know, to stand up to oil and gas pollution and provide a brighter future for his state. The people of California deserve a more just and livable future. And so does our planet. Now, my two guests today are both incredible advocates who have spent decades fighting for the health of communities and our planet, and both joined me on the Toxic Tour with Jennifer Newsom. Kassie Siegel is director of the Center for Biological Diversity's Climate Law Institute. I sometimes think that she knows every oil well and fracking pit in California on a first-name basis. Her litigation, listen to this, led the way to Endangered Species Act protection for the polar bear. And she's a leader in the fight to ban fracking and keep fossil fuels in the ground. My other guest is Darryl Molina Sarmiento, and she is the Executive Director of Communities for a Better Environment. Daryl co-chaired the Stand Together Against Neighborhood Drilling Los Angeles Coalition, or STAND LA, to end neighborhood oil drilling in the city of Los Angeles, and was instrumental in leading the passage of Clean Up, Green Up, a City of Los Angeles ordinance that is one of the first environmental justice green zone policies in the nation. She's worked on the passage of statewide energy and climate policy, as well as local clean energy and transportation goals. Welcome to you both. I'm so grateful that you're able to join us today. So to start off, Kassie, tell us why people all over the country and in fact all over the world should care about this one issue in California.
Thank you so much, Jane. So people should care because we need California to be a leader on health and on climate. Many people view California as a policy model to be followed around the world, but right now it's not. And the number one reason that it's not is because oil companies here are still producing vast amounts of some of the world's dirtiest oil, and that undercuts our progress on climate and on health. And the need to act is so urgent. So we're at just over a little more than 1 degree of warming right now. And we're seeing these climate-fueled fires wiping out entire towns in California and elsewhere. The heat waves are killing people and wildlife and literally melting roadways and other infrastructure. And then these deadly floods are displacing people around the world. And in the United States, 85% of the greenhouse pollution that is driving this crisis comes from oil, gas, and coal. And so that's why addressing the climate crisis and limiting fossil fuel production it's one of the same. And it's why we say we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And the science is telling us we need to limit warming to no more than 1.5 degrees. That is close. And to do that, we need to limit the amount of oil, gas, and coal to no more than could be burned and stay below 1.5. But right now, fossil fuel producers want to dig up so much more than that. If these companies just get to do what they want, those fossil fuels will blow us way past 1.5 degrees. That's why we need governments to tell them no, no more. And that's why we need California to lead the way. And because California's oil is so dirty, it produces more greenhouse gas pollution. A lot of people don't know that first of all, California is the 7th largest oil producer in the country. We're the 3rd largest oil refiner. And the oil coming out of the ground here is more climate damaging than oil from the tar sands of Alberta, Canada. So that's the oil that would come into the country through the Keystone pipeline that people fought so hard against because Keystone would be game over for climate. Well, you know what? California oil is worse than that Canadian oil. And because it's so dirty, it also produces more of this toxic air pollution that hurts our lungs and our health right away. And the double tragedy of all of the health harm from this stuff that Daryl will talk about more is that it's all for oil that should never be produced in the first place for climate reasons. So those are just a few of the reasons why we hope that people care about this problem.
Thanks, Kassie. By the way, is the California oil so dirty and heavy because we're scraping the bottom of the barrel? Was it always that way, or is it just now?
That's exactly right, Jane. I mean, the California oil companies have been getting to drill at will, essentially, in California for over 150 years. And you bet that they went out and they got the easy oil first.
Right.
Some of the highest quality oil first, and what is left is the bottom of the barrel. It's heavy, low-grade, sludgy oil, and it takes more energy and more extreme, dangerous production techniques like fracking, like steam injection, like acidization in order to get it out. So you have more climate damage, more health damage, and more environmental damage from trying to get this last remaining oil.
Thank you for that. Hey, Daryl, can you give the audience a sense of what we're talking about when we say that 2 million Californians live within a half-mile of oil drilling?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Jane. So half a mile, like you mentioned in your introduction, is approximately 2,500 feet. So we are talking about children going to school next to oil drilling. We're talking about you sitting in your home, watching the dishes, standing washing the dishes, you look out your window and you see oil drilling operations. You're at church and there's oil drilling operations in your church parking lot. You go to school, you go to play, you go to pray, you go to worship, and you are surrounded by oil drilling operations. And what this means is that people are being adversely impacted in terms of our health and safety by being in such close proximity to oil drilling. And what we've noticed over the last few decades is that the chemicals are highly corrosive and highly toxic, and our increased drilling operations are making it more unhealthy and unsafe for people to be living near it. So at the minimum, we want to ensure that the people living closest to these drilling operations are protected, which is why we're trying to advance at the statewide level a 2,500-foot buffer zone.
Kassie, how far away from oil drilling is considered safe?
Well, Jane, I don't actually think that we can ever make oil safe on many, many different levels. And I say that not to be flip, but because there's so many different stages in the life cycle of producing oil where it's not safe. So you have the production, and in California, you have millions of people living really close to these oil wells. And so, the harm is from that toxic air pollution. But then you have to transport the oil, and it goes in pipelines, which leaks. Sometimes it goes in these horrible crude oil trains, which can explode and cause terrible tragedies. And then there's all these climate and health harms from the refining. So it's just dirty at every stage in the process. And I mean, the good news is that we will have such a cleaner, healthier world when we switch to clean energy. When we transition cars and trucks to clean electric vehicles, build the infrastructure that we need to get off oil. So, however, in the short term, as that process takes time, what scientists have said is that the health harms are greatest within half a mile. And so we know that at minimum, we need at least a half-mile separation between the production and where people live, as Daryl was just discussing.
That's 2,500 feet.
Yeah.
I lived in Los Angeles in the 1940s. So I know that all the LA basin was on top of a very flourishing oil field. It's been drained now, but it was. And there were no freeways then. But we would drive like from Los Angeles to San Diego or even around Los Angeles, and you would see oil pumps everywhere. So these oil drilling operations were here before homes and schools were. The homes came later and got built right next to drilling. So don't the oil companies have a right to say, hey, we were here first, you didn't have to build so close to us? Or what? How do you deal with the fact that these things were built next to oil drilling?
Well, I'm an attorney, so I will start off with just the legalistic answer to that question. And Daryl, please jump in also. I mean, we're very fortunate in California that the laws on the books are actually quite protective. And the California Supreme Court has actually answered this question, and the answer is no. It doesn't matter. When something that was once believed to be acceptable, it becomes understood that it's actually unsafe, then local and state government can and should, and in fact must, protect people from that hazard. So just from the legalistic standpoint, absolutely not. I mean, the courts have been very consistent that things change over time, and it's the duty of our government to keep people safe and to they're supposed to avoid the terrible harms that people, particularly children and the elderly, face when they're next to these pollution sources.
Well, that answers that. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
And I would add, we get that chicken or the egg question often, and whether it's the industry that came first or the neighborhoods that came first, communities in close proximity to industrial land uses deserve accountability. We deserve transparency from our government and from the businesses that put us at risk for these adverse health incomes. And, we can talk about this later as well, but there is historically discriminatory zoning, an industry that has been rubber stamped with little or no community input or view of the collective harms that have already been done into our communities. And so that's how I would respond to that question.
It's called environmental racism, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And obviously, the land that was close to oil wells and refineries was less expensive. So low-income communities were the ones that ended up there. Yeah. Daryl, when I drive around Los Angeles and see these pump jacks, is it unsafe to be near them?
Yes, absolutely. As you mentioned earlier, these neighborhood oil drilling sites are sometimes just a few feet from homes and are exposing residents, exposing communities to a slew of toxic emissions, including known carcinogens such as benzene, methanol, silica, xylene, aluminum oxide, and dozens of other chemicals that are hidden under public view because of trade secrets. And so there is no accountability, and residents are the ones that have to pay the price. And what does it mean to be exposed to these toxic chemicals is that in a short term, we feel and experience a runny nose, nosebleeds, headaches, dizziness, eye, throat, skin irritation, rashes. And upon long-term exposure, the long-term impacts are cancer, adverse health impacts, including adverse birth incomes from low birth weight to miscarriages, respiratory issues, especially asthma, endocrine disorders, thyroid issues, and this impacts people for generations to come.
Yeah. When we were on the tour, and for the audience, both Daryl and Kassie were on the toxic tour. When I took the first partner, Jennifer Siebil Newsom, on the tour, one of the first stops was in front of what was it, Allen and Co.
Yeah, Allen Co.
It was a big, high wall all around it, so you couldn't really see what was going on. But we were with a young woman named Naleli Kobo and her mother, and they pointed out that they lived right across the street in a brick building right across the street. And from an early age, Naleli suffered from a lot of those things that you're talking about. And then later, in her late teens, she developed cancer of her reproductive organs. And at first she and her mother thought it was just, her bad luck. But then they started to do a survey in the neighborhood and found out that in almost every apartment and every home, people were facing some sort of impact from the presence of this. And then they discovered that it was because of, of this drilling site. And it's not far from USC, by the way, the University of Southern California. And when they finally got it shut down, all the symptoms went away. I mean, obviously not the cancer, and she's in remission now, Naleli is, but the symptoms went away. So, it's good to know that it can clear up quickly if something is done about it. Kassie, if other states already have these protections in place, what's going on in California? Why is this still happening?
I think it's actually pretty simple, and I think it's the power of the oil industry. So, as we've been talking about, the oil industry has been here a really long time, and they've basically gotten to do whatever they want. They've amassed all this wealth and all this power, and they wield their power really aggressively. And it's a long-term problem. Almost, no California officials have stood up to this industry, but that needs to change. And it can change, and there's nowhere better suited than California to lead the way, because we have a diverse economy. We're known for our clean tech, for our innovation, and we can speed up the clean energy transition. We can do it in a way that's fair and just, create so many good paying jobs as we're transitioning to electric vehicles, not having these petroleum cars and trucks anymore. As we build the charging infrastructure that makes that possible, we build zero emissions public transportation that really serves people. All these things are things that people want. They're going to make our lives better, and we can have a bright future. And as that happens, the power of the oil industry is going to wane. We already see that starting to happen, and we have to accelerate it.
The green energy sector is much more job intensive than the fossil fuel sector, right? Daryl, what is Governor Newsom and the California regulators and the state legislature doing about this problem?
Well, as you mentioned, we're seeing this issue in South LA with the Allen Co oil drilling site. We see this in the community of Wilmington and Los Angeles that host the most urban oil drilling sites in the city. We see it in the Central Valley. We see it all across the state of California. And we know that we need to advance a systemic shift in the way that this is happening in the state of California. And so, we've pushed for local bans and ordinances. Like in Los Angeles, we are pushing for a full phase out of oil drilling within the city of LA. We're trying to do something like that within the county as well. But at the statewide level, we've tried to advance a 2,500-foot buffer zone policy. We've tried to do it legislatively. As Kassie mentioned, the oil industry and building trades have pushed back against any of our efforts to pass those health protective measures. And unfortunately, we have some elected officials that are too close to the oil industry. We have some elected officials that are in favor of passing for this 2,500-foot ban. And more recently, the governor issued an executive order to direct the state agency CalGEM to protect frontline communities. And we're waiting for a draft rule to be released later this year. Mm-hmm. And, we've tried the legislative path, and we're trying the regulatory and executive path as well. We're trying all of the paths necessary in order to get this health protective measure of 2,500 feet passed.
Thanks. Are the public health buffer zones controversial? Kassie?
Yeah, I would go back to the poll that you mentioned at the beginning, actually. That is a remarkable result. 79% of Californians support the health buffer. That level of support is so rare, that level of consensus. And so I think what we are seeing is not controversy over the health buffer. It is one of the most popular programs I've ever seen in my career. I can't think of one with a higher level of support. What we're seeing is opposition from the very powerful, rich oil industry, but not controversy, I don't think.
Just out of curiosity, what percentage of California's oil production is represented by those wells that are in communities?
About 12%.
Yeah. Thanks. And how long have we known, Kassie, about this pollution and these impacts?
We've known about this for so long. So, speaking of the climate science, the basic science has been known for well over 100 years. And scientists have sounded the alarm again and again and again. But the fossil fuel polluters have known about it too. And what they did was they embarked on a deliberate disinformation campaign to lie about the science and block solutions, block alternatives to their products. And they're still doing it. That's really, really important to remember, to not be fooled by any industry PR campaigns at this time.
Yeah.
But scientists have been warning us for years in increasingly stark terms. And in fact, this big new report out this week from the global climate science body, the IPCC, is the latest to do this. And the IPCC was formed to advise the nations of the world on how to avoid dangerous climate change. It's the preeminent scientific body. And their latest blockbuster report has some major findings that, and number one, that people should know is that we are truly out of time. So the UN Secretary General said that this report must be the death knell for fossil fuels.
Yeah.
New fossil fuel exploration and production needs to stop. We must keep fossil fuels in the ground. I mean, activists have been saying that for years, but we're seeing it from the world's leading scientists and leading institutions in no uncertain terms. And then number two is, if anybody has been wondering, are all of these weather disasters, are they tied to climate change? You can refer to this authoritative report that the answer is absolutely yes. The droughts, the floods, the extreme fire weather, it is more frequent, it's more intense because of climate change, and it's going to get worse. And then finally, number three, nothing's more important than what happens today to cut emissions. And so when you hear officials saying we need net zero by 2050, that is not going to be good enough. We need action now. And half measures aren't going to cut it. We need big, bold, transformative action. And if we don't get it, the future is really dark. But the flip side is that the more we do and the faster we go to solve this problem, the more benefits we get. The faster we make a better world and we give ourselves back that better future.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, our audience, I urge our listeners to read articles about the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change put out by the UN. It represents the work of 200 scientists and it's been passed through 195 countries. I mean, this is the most up-to-date, up-to-minute climate report, and it says there is no going back. This is it. Things will never again be what they were 10 years ago. What we're seeing now will be kind of the baseline. It's going to get worse, but what we're seeing now is going to be the norm. I urge people to try to read articles about it if you can't get a hold of the report itself. All newspapers and scientific magazines are writing about it right now. Okay, so then what can people do right now to make a difference and to help? What do you two say?
Thank you so much to everybody for joining. First of all, please keep doing that, and please answer every single one of Jane's calls to action. Please go to the petition on Fire Drill Friday's website. There's a petition there to Governor Newsom of California asking him to take action on California's dirty oil problem. And then if you want more information, get more involved, please join us at lastchancealliance.org. That is a network of hundreds of organizations of all kinds: environmental justice, conservation, health, faith, labor, Daryl's organization, my organization, and individuals who are all united on in our call to Governor Newsom to please do this health buffer immediately, stop approving new oil wells and other fossil fuel projects, and do a quick phase out of California's oil and gas production with a just transition. And then wherever you are in the world, please tell your elected officials we need climate action now, and don't take no for an answer.
Thanks, Cassie. Do you want to add anything to that, Daryl?
Yeah, I do want to just echo, especially if you're in California, to urge your elected officials to stop issuing new permits for oil drilling, to push for this 2,500-foot health and safety buffer zone. Put that pressure and let them know that as constituents, you have the ability to hold your elected officials accountable, and they must speak to you and speak to all of the people in California that are trying to protect our health, especially frontline communities that are being hit hardest, first and worst, not only from climate impacts, but from the local pollution impacts as a result of these harmful industries.
Thank you, Daryl. And we're living through our documentary moment. You know, you've probably, all of you have at one time or another seen a documentary about someone really brave, whether it was Rosa Parks or Cesar Chavez or Dolores Huerta or Gandhi, and thought, God, I wonder if I could have been John Lewis, if I could have been brave enough to cross that bridge and stand up to those batons. Would I have been brave enough to sit down on the bus where I'm not supposed to sit? Would I have been brave enough to sit into lunch counters that are banned to Black people, et cetera, et cetera? We always wonder, if we were really challenged, would we be as brave as those people? And most of us are never really challenged that much. Well, this is our moment. This is our documentary moment. Each of us live in different realities. Some of us are physically challenged. Some of us, have jobs that prohibit us doing certain kinds of things. But we all need to really think what we can do that will be really brave, preferably together with other people. That's what's most effective. It's fine to do individual things, get rid of plastic straws and change your light bulbs and all that, and that's fine. That's fine. But this is a global emergency, and individual actions are simply not enough. We have to change policy. We have to persuade government officials, and history has shown us that the best way to do that is through what's called nonviolent civil disobedience. That's what we based Fire Drill Fridays on when we started in DC in the fall of 2019. And it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. But that's what Greta Thunberg has been telling us. It's what all the young student climate activists have been telling us. Join together with others and force our government officials to do what's right. Okay? So we're coming to the end, but Maddie, there's time still for audience questions. Do you have any?
Yes, we're getting a lot. So the first question we'll start with is from Jacqueline on Facebook. Daryl or Cassie, can you be a bit more specific about what part of oil extraction is so harmful? Is it just the pump jacks that are the problem, or is other oil infrastructure dangerous as well?
Well, I can just say that, in a community like Wilmington, which is near the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, we see all phases of oil production, from the extraction phase of oil drilling to the refining phase of hosting 5 major oil refineries in that community, to the transportation of those fuels, and through the combustion of those fuels. And so we know that through all of those oil operations, communities that live on the front lines of that are being impacted through the health impacts from these carcinogenic emissions that are harming people's health on a day-to-day basis. And so it's not just the oil drilling, it's the oil refining, it's the transportation, it's the burning of all of that is impacting our health. And in some of our communities, that's happening all together, all at once.
Next, Maddie, that's great. Thank you very much, Daryl. Maddie?
Thanks, Daryl. From Carlos on Instagram. Will Biden's infrastructure bill have any impact on this issue?
Kassie, do you know an answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, so the hope was that the infrastructure bill would have really, really good funding in there for lots of climate measures that we need. So, for example, over $100 billion for the electric car charging infrastructure that we need. Unfortunately, so much of that was scaled way, way, way back. So we only got $7.5 billion in this current version of the infrastructure bill for electric car charging, for example. The infrastructure bill is not the end. There is also a budget bill coming that can have a lot more of these policy measures in it. But I would say that the infrastructure bill could have been extraordinarily helpful for this. It was the big, bold climate package, the big, bold social justice package that we need. I'm sorry to say it wasn't, but we need to keep fighting for it at every level, keep fighting for that stuff in Congress, and also keep fighting for the state level policy change that we need here at the state and the local level.
Yeah, this is what the Progressive Democratic Caucus in the House, for example, is fighting so hard for. We're hoping that those kinds of things can be put into the reconciliation bill, which can be passed through the Senate, hopefully without risk of being filibustered. Couple more questions, Maddie?
Yes, definitely. From EFEM on Twitter, are there specific oil companies that are responsible for fighting setbacks in California? Should we be contacting them by phone, email, social media, etc.?
Some of the world's largest oil companies are also some of the biggest oil producers in California and some of the worst actors. And often these oil companies do their advocacy through their trade associations. So we see this from the American Petroleum Institute at the national level. And then we see it here in California through these trade associations, the Western States Petroleum Association, and then another one, California Independent Petroleum Association. And they do terrible things. So for example, the last one I mentioned, SIPA, they filed what's called a SLAP suit. And that SLAP is short for Strategic Litigation Against Public Participation. It's a lawsuit to try to intimidate and scare people who are standing up for their rights from doing that. So Daryl's organization and my organization, two environmental justice youth groups, sued the city of Los Angeles for ignoring the law in its oil drilling approvals and for racial discrimination in its oil drilling approvals. To its credit, the city of Los Angeles settled that case and changed its behavior. And then the Oil Trade Association came in and sued our organizations and the youth plaintiffs, the teenagers who were standing up for their rights. That's the kind of thing that these companies do. And fortunately, here in California, we have strong laws. We had that case dismissed as an improper SLAP suit. And that trade association was recently ordered to pay $2.1 million to our attorneys and to the city of Los Angeles attorneys for that. So, but as we've alluded to, they're causing the problem with their products. They're making people terribly, terribly sick at the drill sites, the refineries, and they're fighting progress. And they're even doing things like filing these SLAP suits. So I encourage people to do what they feel, their conscience dictates that they do. I personally spend most of my time focused on the government officials who make the decisions rather than the oil companies, because we know what motivates their executives and we need the government to tell them no. However, I do, really thank people who sign those petitions that are addressed towards fossil fuel executives. Every little bit helps, because they have been really, really bad actors, and we can't emphasize that enough. It's really important for people to know about.
The way to get the fossil fuel companies is to join the Stop the Money pipeline movement that Bill McKibben, among others, has been instrumental in starting. Persuading people to disinvest. And in my book, which I hope you will get, it's now out in paperback, there's a whole chapter on how to do that. Literally bullet points on how to join the Stop the Money pipeline.
Yeah, and I would just add as well that, the Western states petroleum industry, they're spending millions of dollars influencing our legislators. And at the same time, at the local level, they're using their insidious tactics by funding local community groups, by funding schools, by buying community members Barbies, gas cards, car wash gift certificates, to try to buy the silence of community. And those insidious tactics are what we're up against, not only at the local level, but also at the national and statewide levels.
Right.
We have two more questions. Yes. So from Jessica on Facebook, could you talk more about how to address the worsening wildfires in California and all around the world? I feel so at a loss sometimes. Is there anything we can do right now to help stop the fires? And what about in the longer term as well?
Yeah, so it is fossil fuel pollution that is driving these fires. So it's really, really important to get government to take urgent action now on cutting emissions. That is the only way we can prevent the fires from getting so much worse in the future. And I know that your question was going to what do we do to stop the fires right now? But unfortunately, we need to be focused on not letting the problem get worse. And then another thing that's also really, really important, because fire in our forests and many fire adapted ecosystems is not itself bad. The problem is exacerbated by building homes and communities in unsafe areas. And so another really important thing is to protect those communities with fire safe measures. So that's things like fire abatement. I mean, it is amazing how small measures like not having flammable roofs and actually doing the fire abatement in the immediate vicinity around the homes and communities can make a real big difference. And those are the things we need to do. We don't need, sometimes the logging industry likes to say we need a lot of logging to stop the fires. That's actually not correct. We need measures in the immediate area around existing homes, and we need to not be approving big new sprawl developments in unsafe areas. And then, of course, we need to support the people who have lost their homes, who have been displaced by these fires, to get involved in those aid efforts. But unfortunately, we can't turn back the clock in terms of the warming that we've already seen, but we can stop it from getting so much worse with really urgent action today.
Thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, and I would just add that, like Cassie said, just to overemphasize, we need to stop the expansion of the fossil fuel infrastructure in the state of California and in the world, because this is what is causing and contributing to this climate crisis that we're experiencing right now with the wildfires. I'm going to keep talking about the frontline communities like the ones that CBE organizes in Richmond and East Oakland and Southeast LA and Wilmington. And our communities, EJ communities, environmental justice communities are hit extremely hard, not only by the impacts of the climate as a result of the wildfires, but because of the already existing pollution from the numerous toxic facilities and toxic emissions. And so we need to advance a just recovery for the state of California, for our communities, so that we can be resilient and survive and thrive against the impacts of climate crisis, such as wildfires. And we've done things like mass distribution. We have to create wildfire kits for our members to create their own air filtration systems within their homes, just to create some measures of protection and immediate relief from wildfires.
I heard today that the air in Minnesota and Denver is as bad as any place in the world, and that comes from the California and Oregon fires. Isn't that amazing? Somebody said that Denver looks like Beijing right now. Denver. Yeah. One last question.
Okay.
Oh, Maddie, go for it.
The last question that we have is from Sabine on Facebook, and we actually had quite a few questions like this. I don't live in California, so who can I pressure or what can I do to help push Governor Newsom to get fossil fuels out of the state? I actually live on the East Coast, but I know how critical California is in this fight. Any advice?
Well, it actually is important for people from all over to speak out. I mean, California is viewed as a model for global action. So I think your voice is important. I think it's important for Governor Newsom to hear from you, but also, of course, at the federal level, it's important for President Biden to hear from you, because we need President Biden to be the climate president. It's important for your members of Congress to hear from you. And so I would just urge you to keep following Fire Drill Fridays for ways that you can get involved, and the other links that we've mentioned today. And just don't take no for an answer. We simply cannot go away as a movement until our responsible officials really get the change launched that we need.
And New York's air quality has been affected by the California fires. So you could mention that if you want to write to Governor Newsom. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Daryl. I love you both so much, admire all the work you do, and I so appreciate your taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So that's all the time we have today. To all you firefighters and even those outside of California, thanks for joining this profoundly important and often overlooked fight. You can be sure that Fire Drill Fridays, we're going to keep pressure on the governor of California until he takes the long overdue actions to protect us. Not just us, of course. There are hundreds of environmental justice and health organizations all over California that are calling on Governor Newsom to issue a moratorium on new permits within 2,500 feet of sensitive sites until a formal public health ruling process delivers equal or greater protections, okay? But you know the drill. To make change, we need to take action. So you can join us by going to firedrillfridays.com/take action and sign a petition, which you will find there, to send an email directly to Governor Newsom and his top aides, asking them to stop neighborhood drilling. Every day that Governor Newsom is in office is an opportunity for him to show the world that he's a leader on climate and public health. So let's fill their inboxes to show them the groundswell of support. And boy, Governor Newsom, to act. Frontline communities simply cannot wait any longer. And of course, we're not forgetting about ending fossil fuel subsidies on a federal level. Biden needs to act now to end these inappropriate and dangerous handouts once and for all. The climate emergency is here, and we must demand our leaders take urgent action. You'll find lots of ways to take action. Again, you go to Fire Drill Fridays, plural, Fridays.com/take action, and you'll see what to do. And I hope to see you in a couple of weeks for movie night. That's Thursday, August 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, I guess that's Easter time. You'll get a reminder in the mail. And until then, hey, stay safe and healthy. Right as we navigate this new phase of the pandemic. Love and support each other and your communities. Pay attention to your neighbors. Do they need help? Are they okay? Let's make sure we're strengthening the bonds that hold us together and that we take time to breathe and to rest, because we need all of our collective strength to tackle the issues in front of us when time is running out. See you next time.